Good morning and welcome to episode 4 of our EQ at Work Executive Thought Series brought to you by PTS Africa. We kicked this off in the last quarter of 2020 and have started a journey that we believe is quite exciting and quite useful for most of us as professionals and even people in other different walks of life to generally get a better understanding of emotional intelligence. We believe this is an opportunity to get practical insights about emotional intelligence at work and to learn how it can be more important than IQ for leadership success. We also believe this is an opportunity to gain an understanding from leaders and how they've leveraged emotional intelligence along their own journeys through their careers. It's also an opportunity to receive access to different tools that build the emotional muscle necessary to lead in these uncertain and unprecedented times that we're living through, and hopefully contribute to driving sustainable growth and sustainable performance for you as an individual and for the organizations that we may contribute to. Thank you very much for joining us, and we really appreciate you making the time. We have an auspicious guest today, all the way from the warm heart of Malawi, Thokozani Unyolo, who is the head of marketing and communications at Standard Bank in Malawi. Toko is joining us live from Malawi, and I would like to welcome her officially to the show. Welcome, Toko.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Great to see you. How are things in Malawi?
The things in Malawi are great. The weather is great. We're still the land of the rising sun as well. So things are quite good.
Awesome, awesome. No, this is really exciting. Since we kicked off this series, we started off with a gentleman based in Tanzania. Then we also went to Kenya. And in the last session that we had in November last year, we had a lady based here in South Africa. I'm also in Johannesburg. So we are doing a bit of continent trotting, if I could call it that. And it's great to be in the warm heart of Africa, in the land of the rising sun, as you call it. So really, really great to have you on board and to have a conversation with you about your journey, emotional intelligence, and really just share insights and your understanding of how emotional intelligence may have contributed to some of the milestones along your path so far. But without diving too deep into the juicy stuff, we would really appreciate an opportunity to understand who Thokozani Unyolo is. And to do that, no doubt we have to go to the very beginning and try and get an understanding of, where this all started. Where were you born? Some of your early days growing up, probably some insights into your schooling, and just tell us a bit more about your family.
All right. No, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Thokozani Unyolo. I'm a wife and a mother. I'm married to Leon Unyolo, and I have a lovely 15-year-old son called Paul Jason Unyolo. I was born in Malawi, in Atlanta, and I come from a family of 10, and I'm the last born in that family. So I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. 2 of the siblings passed away, and my father is late. His name is Stephen Mijiga, and my mother was Chrissy Mijiga. In terms of schooling, so I have been educated on the continent. That's what I call myself, a Pan-African citizen. I did my primary school in Malawi at Hillview Primary School. And thereafter, I went to Kamuzu Academy, which is in Kasungu in Malawi as well. And having finished that, I actually took a gap year, spent 1 year in South Africa, in Cape Town, just basically reflecting what I really wanted to do with my life. And then moved to Namibia, where I did my Bachelor of Business Administration degree. Having left Namibia, I came back home and worked for a bit. Then I did a Master's of Business Administration at Gibbs in South Africa. So in a nutshell, that's who I am.
And no doubt that was a phenomenal opportunity for you. Not all of us have that privilege, and I guess it has contributed in many ways to who you are today, having lived and experienced different cultures and different parts of the wonderful continent that we call home.
Yeah.
Interesting. And if we were to take you back to your primary school, let's call it that bridge between primary and high school. So say when you were approximately 12, 13, maybe 14, if we had asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, what would you have said?
A doctor. So I really, really used to enjoy every time I go to the doctor, seeing them in those white gowns, helping people. And it was really a passion point for me for a while until I started growing up and realizing that, okay, people actually die. So I was like, if I take this job and someone dies on me, how would it impact me? Would I feel like I had failed, And the people were relying on me to actually save this person. But I really, really wanted to be a doctor.
Wow. That's interesting. You've gone quite on quite a different path from from the medical space, no doubt. And I guess we'll unpack some of that as we go along. But if we were again to round about that same time, when you were a early teen and you were really starting to build on some of the foundational dynamics that you had probably got from the home environment, if we had asked someone who interacted with you, let's say a teacher, to describe Thoko, how would he or she have described the young Thoko in grade 8, grade 9, Form 1, Form 2, around about then?
If you had to ask any of my teachers, they'll probably tell you that I was highly focused, disciplined, and very, very performance driven.
Okay. And where would you say that came from? If you agreed with that, I'm assuming you would agree with their assessment.
Yeah, I think it came from watching my dad, and also having older siblings. You always want to be better than them. Being the youngest, you want to basically do something that no one else in the family has done. So
Right.
As I was growing up, I watched my dad navigate several industries. So he worked as a CEO for Air Malawi. He worked as a CEO for Eskom. He worked as a CEO for, that time it was Malawi Telecommunications Limited. And I was like, you know what? I also want to follow that kind of footpath, and I want to be able to navigate my career based on how he has led his. And I used to watch him. I used to spend a lot of time. I was one who was always very, very close and talking to him all the time, trying to understand his world. How was he navigating these different industries, and what kept him sane? Yeah.
Wow. So it clearly points to your dad having been a big and early influence into who you are and the path that you've subsequently taken.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Were you spoiled as the baby in the house?
No, can you imagine? I think after having 10 kids, no one wants to spoil anyone. I wasn't spoiled. We were all treated the same. I think like most African families, we always had extended family living with us, and also a lot of black tax issues. So my dad's nephews, nieces had to be paid for. So I always felt like I really never got spoiled the way a last-born should really be spoiled.
Unfortunately, I'm a firstborn. I'm a firstborn, so I cannot relate at all. I changed nappies. No doubt. But look, and why we try and start the conversation back then is because what we've picked up is there are some threads of experience or threads of insights in those early formative years that influence who you become and probably help you to navigate the challenges of your professional life. And I'll try and bring that back as we continue the conversation. But to kind of build off your father, and I think you've positioned your father as one of those prominent influences in the early days of your deciding what to study, and probably taking advantage of the opportunity to travel and to go to Cape Town to reflect. And when you mentioned that, I found that quite profound, because in some cases you hear of people who take a gap year, but it's not as common for most Africans to have that opportunity. But would you say that really helped, and using that time to really think? And what else did you do, or what came out of that year for you?
Okay, so I think for me, it really helped because it crystallized the direction that I wanted to take for my life. So before that gap year, I'd actually taken a bit of a detour also when I finished my primary school. So I should just give you a bit of context. And I went to the US, and basically, again, it was one of those things to say, I've watched so many movies about the US. I think for me, this is the kind of life I want. I want to be educated in the US. And I did that after my primary school. Yeah. And when I took that time out, and after a year, 3 months, I said, no, I don't think the US is for me. I'm an African child. Let me go back home. And everyone thought, oh, you must be crazy. Who lives in the US and comes back to Malawi, out of all countries? But yeah, I came back to basically, continue my life in Malawi. So when I took the gap year in Cape Town, one thing that I did was, I spent a lot of time on the beach. I'll go walk around, just try and understand what's going on. And I realized that I'm someone who loves turning ideas into reality. I would spend quite a bit of time writing, and thinking through, and, telling myself to say, okay, if I actually want to get into a career or any profession, it has to be something that is going to impact, someone. It has to be something that's going to realize growth. It's going to be something that a community can talk about. And that's what I did. So I ended up deciding on doing business administration because I said, okay, I want to be a generalist. And I wanted to also be able to navigate in different industries without really just, carving myself into one specific sector.
Wow, that's quite profound. And I'm curious, how old were you at that time?
That was 1998. So about what? I'm almost 40 now. So you can do the calculation for me.
Okay. Yeah. So you were still a teen, late teen, so
late
to speak.
Teen, yeah.
Yes. Okay. No, that's interesting, and I guess not everyone may have the opportunity to go and do that type of reflective exercise on the beach in Cape Town. But to whatever extent, I think what you are articulating is the power in the opportunity to reflect, the power in the opportunity to consider the different options, and then have the emotional stability to say, okay, coming from here, this is what I want to achieve. Where can I direct my efforts? And for you, it was then to go into business and generalists, but progressively move in a specific direction, given the insights you had derived from the reflection.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's really interesting and quite profound. And I guess looking at that, you then look at other pivot points, if I could call it that you no doubt would have gone through. When I looked at your profile on LinkedIn and I see you've moved from one industry to the other, and you've progressively then narrowed into your current role where you've been for a number of years. And I guess there's an opportunity to pull all together, consolidate the different experiences that you have. Tell me about Thoko and relationships. So we've talked about your relationship with your dad and how it kind of gave you some grounding, some direction, something to aspire towards. But is there someone else outside of your family circle, perhaps, who played a role in just, being a emotional connection in terms of a relationship that you placed some reliance on in those early days of your professional journey?
Yes. So I think for me, the biggest growth, learning, and experience that I've had so far in my career has been when I worked in the telecommunications industry.
Right.
I had a stint in with Celtel, Zain, Airtel as they rebranded over the years. And one of the people who really inspired me during that phase was actually our current vice president now, Dr. Saulos Klaus Chilima. He used to be the sales director first at Celtel when I joined. And he basically grew to managing director within a very short space of time while I was there. And for me, what I saw in him was someone who has the power of determination and a lot of faith and focus. So you could see in how he would do his work, you could see how his department was performing. And his journey was very clear. Throughout even our time there, we knew where he was going. We knew what he wanted, what was his ultimate goal. So you could see that he had a plan. He was focused. He was determined. And also that faith played a big, big anchor in who he is and what he has become. And he still uses that up to now.
Wow, that's an interesting angle, because it's not common that the faith angle is brought into the picture. And I think for you to refer to him as also a prominent figure in your journey, and then to pull on the faith dynamic is quite noble and quite distinct. How does faith play a role in your life today?
So for me, faith is actually what grounds me. I know that, people have different beliefs, but I'm a Christian, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Right. And my day doesn't start without a conversation with God. So when I wake up in the morning at 4:30, 5 a.m., I start off with a 1-hour dawn prayer service, which I watch. And then after that morning service, I usually go for a prayer walk and then start my exercise. And I also make sure that I read a devotion, which my husband always shares with the whole family every morning, and a prayer for the day. And what it does is I pick specific words in that time that are going to carry me for the day. And in everything that I've done, everything that I've achieved, I've actually integrated God in my plans. And when I write it down, I always tell myself to say, God promised us in Ephesians 3:20 to say he's able to do above and beyond what we can imagine. And I wasn't born to be ordinary. I was born to be extraordinary, and I believe in that. And God affirms that. And then I also tell myself to say, in Habakkuk 2, they talk about the vision is for an appointed time. So you always have to write it down. So for me, faith has been basically my anchor throughout my career, and how I've been able to navigate the different ups and downs that I've gone through, the seasons that I go through, have actually been a faith. I call myself a faith product.
Wow. The outcome of a lot of faith as an input is Thoko. Yes, that's interesting. Yes. Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. So, and thank you for sharing that, because no doubt sometimes matters of faith are quite personal. And as you rightly put it, we all have different beliefs and derive some of that spiritual strength from different sources. But no doubt, I think in a emotionally intelligent world, being open to that diversity is important, and simply respecting the fact that people believe in different things and leverage that faith in different ways is important. So I guess building off again, your dad giving you a great example, and then this individual you mentioned who gave you an example of faith and focus and clarity of vision. You say at the time when you guys worked together, you and your colleagues could see quite clearly where he was going and what he wanted to achieve. And you've been able to build off some of that in how you approach your way and how you actually start every day, which is quite profound. If I take a slight detour and go back to your learning journey, and no doubt the conversation around emotional intelligence ends up being a comparative discussion around EQ versus IQ, understanding the softer side of things versus the more hard technical elements. And for someone like you who has invested quite a bit and was able to progressively go from an education point of view all the way through to postgraduate level, and no doubt also benefit from doing that in different environments. What are your thoughts around or on balancing those hard skills with the soft skills?
I think for me, my thoughts around balancing hard skills, which I look at as the more technical things, you know, your economic analysis, strategic planning, designing, and the soft skills, which, like you rightly mentioned, are the EQs, you know, being resilient, you know, for me, they are complementary. And it's very, very important for people to understand that you cannot do without either or. So the hard skills, those ones, they're teachable. You know, we learn them from school, but the soft skills are more nurtured and cultivated. And I think for me, they come more in your interpersonal realm. And what is very, very important is that as we nurture these type of skills, we need to be very open. We need to be humble. We need to be persistent. And we also need to be very, very self-aware, because without self-awareness, one cannot really navigate some of these soft skills that we assume are not as key as one is navigating their leadership journey and even their career and their personal life.
Great. I like those words. You mentioned being open, being humble, and having self-awareness. And I think those are words that absolutely resonate with striking that balance. And like you say, it's about them being complementary, because you can't necessarily thrive with a bias on one over the other. And in your experience, is that something that you believe has become, or let's say the need for the balance, is it more relevant now than possibly 20 or 30 years ago? Or what are your thoughts on our progression from a professional point of view?
For me, from a professional point of view, it is actually beyond, it's actually non-negotiable, especially with what the pandemic has done to a lot of us, where you're now leading people in a context that's unprecedented. You're leading people online and you're not seeing them, and you don't know what's going on in their context and in the environment where you're speaking to them from. And those soft skills are what make the difference between someone who's going to be successful and someone who's not. Because if you're going to be that type of leader who's purely transactional, just calls to check on work, you could not know what exactly that your person is actually, you know, in a very bad state, or they could be depressed. And because you haven't just been, you know, connecting in the right way and checking and trying to balance work and, you know, integrating the environment that they're in, for me, it can actually affect output. It can actually affect the effectiveness of what you're trying to do. So it's actually something that I would encourage every leader to actually ensure that they ensure their managers, people who are leading teams, as well as people below them, to understand that these are not soft as the way we see them, but they're actually essential in this day and age and the future that we're going into.
You're so right. I couldn't agree with you more so, and you've really brought it to life by referring to the times that we're living through now with the COVID pandemic. The need to be a lot more sensitive and emotionally connected is an essential. You said it's a non-negotiable, and I would absolutely agree with you. And I think the comment that we're capturing here is that soft skills are not soft in the way we see them, but they're actually essential. They are critical and core to achieving the progress or the leadership that we need to drive. Picking up on that, what would you say are some of the critical success factors, no doubt in the journey that you've had in your career, going from the early days of your professional journey through middle management to senior management now? What are some of the critical success factors that you would say have contributed to you achieving what you've achieved?
So I think for me, there's several success factors. So in anything that you do, especially in corporate, one needs to make sure that they have executive support. You need to have clear objectives and a flexible plan. You need to also have, what is the clear picture of success? What does success mean? What are those things when you're going to say this has been successful? What are those things that you look at and from an organizational perspective are success? And I always, if I'm running any big projects, anything strategic, even if it's small stuff, I always ensure that I build a clear cross-functional team. And when I'm selecting people in those specific areas, I look at passion, I look at energy, and I look at value that they're going to bring to the table. So for me, that's been very, very important. And then the other one is listening. I mean, in my career now, I work with Gen Zs, and what you find with Gen Zs is they have ideas that I'm like, oh, okay, but I have to take in that kind of feedback because I'm not a Gen Z. So I've learned that it's important that you listen quite a lot and take in the ideas because they're actually quite brilliant and their thinking is quite different from what my thinking is. And the last one for me is just being open-minded, when you're doing anything, have an open mind, explore. So I read a lot, I watch what's going on the continent, what's going on the globe. And I say, okay, if I'm going to do this, how am I going to be disruptive? How am I going to be different? How am I going to create talkability? So those are the things that I would say have been critical for me.
That's very valuable. And it's great to pick up on those insights. And that's partly why we at PTS Africa are keen to have these conversations, because you sharing your story and us picking up on thoughts that have contributed to your success as an executive gives us a little bit of a cheat sheet. I listened to a fellow corporate athlete, let me call it that, the other day, who was talking about how in school, especially in primary school and all the way through to high school, it's drilled into you that don't look at someone else's answers. It's your work, you're marked for your work. And if you so much as use someone else's answers, you're in big trouble. But the reality is in your professional life and as a grown-up, we have this amazing opportunity to pick up insights from different stories. And even as you're sharing and you're reiterating a couple of points, I think for myself and for the people who've joined us on this and who would listen to this subsequently, we're picking up nuggets of script that we will then apply in our world, whether it's around the faith and focus that you referred to, or the determination and drive that your father exemplified for you. And now for you, in terms of your critical success factors, you've talked about clear objectives, flexible plan. You've said making sure that you assemble a team that is cross-functional, and you try and make sure you can understand their passion, their energy levels, and still be clear around what value they bring. No doubt all of this stuff will be applicable in one way or the other. And that's, really, really exciting for us to be able to pick up on those nuggets that have contributed to Thoko being someone who we can look up to, and hopefully contribute to us being able to take further steps in our own journeys to the extent that we may be. So really, really appreciate those personal insights. If I can spin it a little bit, no doubt there have been some shortcomings. No doubt there have been some mistakes made along the way. Are you comfortable to share with us maybe one, maybe two key mistakes that you've encountered or that have happened along your path, and some of the main learnings that have come from there?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge Natasha, that I'm happy you're enjoying the discussion. And if you allow me, there's a question I would like to address on this particular topic before I move on to the question you've asked.
Sure.
So Anne Doroge has asked around, what do I mean when I say executive support as one of the success factors that has contributed to my success? So I'll give you in my context. Currently, I'm head of marketing and communication for Standard Bank. And one of the key things that I needed to deliver, like 2020, was a new brand positioning for Malawi that our group had actually worked and created. And what I needed to do then was to make sure that, firstly, I had a conversation with our chief executive, because a brand positioning is basically owned. The custodian of the brand is the chief executive and myself as head of marketing, as well as the rest of the organization. But total ownership of a brand rests between the two of us. So I basically went and sat with him and said, Chief, this is not a marketing campaign. This is actually a brand positioning, and you have to own it. So from a project implementation and everything, the total ownership rests with the CE in this case, and then I would run it. But also what I did after having that conversation with the chief executive, I presented the campaign to the whole executive leadership team. And the message to them was to say, this is not a marketing campaign. This is for you as the executive in your department to make sure your team is rallying behind this campaign. So we're going to appoint people within your teams to actually be brand champions to help us make sure that this message is cascaded. So that's the kind of executive support that I'm referring to.
Wow, that's very interesting, and I think the interplay between shared accountability and ownership, like you say, where the CEO and yourself in your functional role is a key dynamic. Is that executive support, and I'd like to drill in on that a little bit, is that something you have had through your different career journeys and in the different roles that you've been? And could you share a bit more on that?
Yes. So throughout my career, I've had executive support, even for my growth. So I think for me, we need to be very clear to say, firstly, there's Thoko the personal, and then there's Thoko the professional. And what is important is to say, in your career, you need to be able to identify within your organization, as well as out, who are those executives who, firstly, you can connect with, secondly, who will add value, and who will grow you, who are interested in your story. And what you find is you have to go and have conversations with those people from a growth perspective. And also, if you're close enough, you can have a personal conversation. So for me, I'll give you a context of a growth perspective. And then if you look at, I can even share the projects that I've also had executive sponsors. So when I was working at Airtel, I had a matrix, Nancy Matimu, she's actually based in Kenya, who I used to report to. And Nancy had never met me. But because she was delivering through me in Malawi, I was very, very close to her. And, we used to have conversations outside of work. Yeah. Where we'll talk about what are my aspirations, what are my ambitions, where do I want to go? And she was also very, very ambitious. And one of the things that happened is because of that, she would share with me how she is navigating her career. And when she was leaving Nairobi, when she was leaving the head office, her role, she actually said to the group marketing team, the only person who can come and take over my job is Thokozani Unyolo. And for me, that was basically one of my biggest pivots, And I had another one where we had a financial director, and now she's working with Vodacom in Mozambique. She's a CFO. Because of my aspiration and me sharing to say, this is where I want to go. Our MD said to me, I want you to work on this business transformation project with the CFO. So I said, okay. And as we started having conversations around the business, we started talking about everything. And I asked her to say, okay, can you share with me how you're so young? How come, you were in Bahrain, now you're in Malawi, and then you were in Zambia, you went to the group, you were in Amsterdam. And then she said, Toko, you need to have a blueprint for your life. And then she shared with me her blueprint. And basically, since the time she shared that blueprint, I built my own, and that's what I've used to navigate. And basically, all that does to you is it gives you a lot of focus, clarity on what are the trainings you need, who are the people that need to be part of your journey, from your subordinates to your peers, to your MD, to people outside that need to be part of that journey. So for me, it's really, really important that we understand. And then when I'm looking at projects, it's very, very important to say, when you're doing a project in any organization, having an executive sponsor gives you an opportunity to have someone who you can go and bounce with. If there are any challenges that you're seeing, that can give that voice above yours to say, you know what, guys, this is about us. If this is going to become a movement, this is what we need to do. So that's the picture that I was trying to paint with that executive sponsor piece.
No, that's powerful, and I think it's relatable, because even if you take it before going into the professional space, in your home dynamics, and I remember when I was much younger, and we were talking earlier about family dynamics. As a firstborn, I had the pressure of needing to be that executive support and the confidence giver to my younger siblings. And no doubt you find that in instances where you do have a bigger brother or a mentor or someone you look up to, it gives you a certain level of confidence and comfort to attack or to move forward and to drive. And as you were explaining, these different examples for you, it's exactly that. You have someone in the organization who you can share with, who you feel safe enough to expose, certain things that to be gaps, or where as a younger person, potentially you're able to tap into the wisdom and experience of someone who's older. And I think that dynamic, as you've highlighted here, is a powerful ingredient and has provided you with some very useful pivot points along your career journey. And I think it's been profound to be able to have pulled that out of our conversation today. And I really think that will benefit a lot of us younger people who are on the call, because we can learn from your experience and take that forward. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you're so right to then say, pulling all of that together and creating a blueprint for your own journey gives you that clarity and focus, which no doubt sometimes we take for granted. But as an organization, we've got plans and business cases and all of those things that we refer to, and we sometimes underestimate the value of doing that in your personal life and in your professional journey as well. Really, really awesome to pull that.
Yeah. Let me go back to your question.
Yes.
No, Faye, I see your comment. Thank you very much. So I think, I would be lying if I say I've never had any mistakes in my life. And I think the one that is fresh in my mind is something that happened 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, I was given a client, and one of the things that I needed to do to basically demonstrate that, I'm doing very well is to go and present to a panel, in South Africa, and what have I done and how have I delivered value for the bank, having been working with this client. And, I went to that presentation, brilliant presentation, everything. I mean, I was like, I've nailed it, I've done so well. And, all my colleagues said, oh, this was so good, And, when I now was called to be given my feedback, I was told, oh, no, you didn't actually do well. And I was puzzled to say, okay, what did I do wrong? I explained the opportunities that I found. I explained the relationships that I have. I basically, have shown that the bank is going to be making money off this client. What more did I not do? And the biggest feedback was that I didn't show how I added value because I was using we throughout the presentation. And it took me back, but it was actually a big lesson for me to say, most of us, as we tell our stories and what we've done in organizations, we look at using I as positioning. But for me, what I learned is that when you're using I, you are showing what you as Thoko or you as Leroy did in that particular deal or conversation. And you need to be able to know, how do you weave yourself in that story? I was fixated on making sure I'm showing that there was a cross-functional team. We worked together. We went to meet the client. I wasn't really weaving myself and navigating myself in the story. So I think for me, the biggest lesson and what I'd like to share is to say, when you are put in a position, it's important that you find your I. And that when you find your I, it's very, very easy in any role that you have to demonstrate the value that you bring on the table, because it's very clear. And don't feel bad that, oh, this person is all about positioning themselves. No, you're demonstrating your value, and it's okay to demonstrate your value.
No, that's find your I. And I like that. I think we must put that on a meme with your picture on it as a takeout from today. But it's amazing how you're able to take that incident where you initially thought you had knocked the lights out. When the feedback comes, you find out that it was not as much of a success as you initially thought. But in deriving the lessons from that feedback, I think you find a lot more power. And I guess it also emphasizes again the power of feedback, firstly, and having the opportunity to get that feedback, but also quite importantly, to then find the lesson and draw on that lesson. And in this case, around understanding how to weave, the collective collaboration that may have gone into a project, but also isolating and evidencing your contribution and being able to position yourself, because that's just as important in all of this. Being able to stand out and show your value is just as critical. And I think in that there's a lesson around possibly culture, because I would like to also assume that generally you find as Black Africans, our culture tends to be more collective, and we, Simunye, Ubuntu, Patiritese, those type of things. Whereas other cultures may have had the opportunity to break free from some of that dynamic and really find a way to place the I strategically to then benefit, especially in a corporate environment. And I think your example really brings that home, to be able to find a way to make sure that the I comes out and the value that you bring is very strong. I'm really enjoying this conversation and struggling to find how to thread some of these nuggets, because you're throwing them so many at a time, so to speak. But I think that's the opportunity that I'm enjoying, having these conversations with different leaders. And because no doubt in everyone's story, there are certain things that are so unique and so useful that we can all take. And maybe as we bring the conversation to a close, you did discuss a little bit earlier on around working with people from different generations. You said you're not a Generation Z, but at the same time, you're not a baby boomer. And there was a time when you were at a certain positioning within the generational dynamics of an organization. But in the world that we're in now, and with some of the challenges that talk to, well, let's call it challenges and opportunities that we as 21st century leaders have to deal with, what are some of the things that you would give as advice for someone in a leadership role and leading into the future? There's new ways of work, there's the emotional elements that you talked to earlier on, there's the generational dynamics that I've highlighted, but what would your advice be for leaders leading into the future?
Thank you. No, thank you, Valerie, Alice, and Tessie for joining. I see the questions. I'll respond to them after this one. So I think for me, right now, for any leader and the future of work and everything that's changing, the specific skills that I think commonly in the past we were not thinking about that everyone will have to need. So I'd say for me, the first one is analytical thinking and innovation. It's very, very important. The second one is commercial acumen. And the third one is financial leadership. I think we know that no business wants to make losses. So we'll still need the commercial acumen and we'll still need the financial leadership. But something that's coming very upfront there is actually creativity and EQ. So creativity has become a skill that if you don't have, you won't be able to see things differently. And for me, it's something that people need to start nurturing and building. And also the EQ aspect, like I shared earlier, for me, it's a non-negotiable.
Powerful. Absolutely. And I would completely agree with you. And I think that's very useful to be able to derive those insights and apply. And you're right. You know, we've had a great conversation in terms of what you and I have been doing, and it's awesome that we can now, you know, use some of the remaining time to answer some of the specific questions from the floor. Valerie has highlighted one where she says, as a leader in the marketing department, which is mostly results oriented, how do you handle being empathetic to your team, even when the outcome is not impressive? Okay.
No, thank you so much, Valerie. So I think for me, I'm one of those people who believes that, you know, there's a time for fun and there's time to play and there's time to be nice. But when it comes to substance, one needs to have very firm conversations. So my team understands my vision very, very clearly, and my standards, my expectations, and what I expect of them, and basically what the big picture is. So if someone is not coming to party, I don't mince words. I'll have a very candid conversation with you. And if it means we have to go through a performance improvement plan, we will do that. And when I do it in a very objective way and make sure that the person also understands that I'm not trying to victimize you, but I want you to be able to actually bring yourself to the specific standard and to grow. Because for me, I have grown because I've had people who help me understand this is the expectation. You know, if you don't deliver, yes, we can chat when things are good, we can have fun, we can laugh, but when it comes to work, let's do work. So I think for me, it's very, very important that we should always draw the invisible line between ourselves and our team, give them, you know, access to yourself. But when it comes to dealing with such issues of performance and results, it's a non-negotiable again to say we need to be result-oriented.
And I would also maybe throw in the word accountability. It's about holding the team accountable. And I think that's, you know, what you're saying. While we focus on the results, we have a clear line about delivery and we make sure we support. So like you say, whether it's about training and performance improvement, it's a non-negotiable. We've got to deliver. And that's very profound. From Faye with a very unique surname, finding your eye. Wow. How then do you go about finding your I without coming out as, or coming across as arrogant or as a know-it-all?
Okay, so I think for me, I'll play back to you what I now did after that feedback that I got and where it got me now. So I was given another client last year, and now what I did is I found collaborators across the continent. So I had a collaborator in Nigeria who works as our head of client coverage. I had another collaborator who's within that business unit who works as a regional regional head of client coverage. And then locally, I basically looked at who in the Malawi team can help me understand how these people expect this I as I present. And when I now was working with the new client that I was given, I basically started to highlight what exactly did I do to basically grow this client. So some of the things that I did was, I'm from FMCG, I've done telco, and now financial services, but this client is in the FMCG space. So I brought in that FMCG experience, in how I worked with the manager, client coverage on that relationship. I made sure that I brought in my marketing experience, my FMCG experience, and weaved it into the story. The other thing that I did is, one of the key things I manage and deliver for the bank is what we call socioeconomic and environmental impact. And I basically showed that, because of me working on this relationship, I, from the bank perspective, look after the socioeconomic impact, and I've got a community project that I'm working on, and I've linked that community project with this client, which no one else did. I'm the one who suggested it. So when I now went to tell the new story on my new client, I basically said, my name is Thokozani Unyolo. I'm head of marketing and communication, but today I'm speaking to you with the lens of executive sponsor for this particular client. And I'm going to tell you the 4 key things that I'm responsible for. And number 1, I basically have to build a relationship at a C-suite level. Number 2, I had to bring in my experience from telecoms, from FMCG, to show that I'm actually growing value for this client. Number 3, as an executive member of the bank, I needed to demonstrate the socioeconomic environmental impact. And number 4, I was meant to be coaching and growing the manager client coverage as we unlock value. So throughout the presentation, I basically made sure I played up all the things that I delivered. And I still talked about the team, but I played that up. And it was like, wow, can you be given more clients now? And for me, it actually was a big lesson, because it's something that a lot of us take for granted. And we think, oh, those ones who say, are just positioning themselves. No. They're actually demonstrating value, is what I learned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very, very profound. I think I've got some network issues, but very powerful how you've been able to pick up on the lessons in those instances. And I think it's a great example which answers the question that has been posed to us. Fantastic conversation, phenomenal insights, and really an example of leadership in the age that we're living in. Toko, you have a profound story, and I'm really honored to have had the opportunity to talk to you. We do need to bring the conversation to a close, and as a very quick summary in terms of the 3 key takeouts that I've been able to summarize with the team: soft skills are not soft in the way that you see them, but they're actually essential, critical, and a non-negotiable. Having a vision is key, and ultimately translating that into a blueprint for your life gives you the focus and clarity to then deliver and achieve the success you're looking for. And the point that you've hopped on a few times, which I found very exciting: find your I. And I think that is so profound in balancing the we and collaborative input, but still making sure that your value, your contribution is clear and is visible to be able to help propel you in your career and to take things forward. Look, no doubt a few of us are going to start following you on LinkedIn and elsewhere, and we'll hopefully continue the conversation offline, so to speak. But we really, really appreciate your thoughts and your openness, sharing your insights. And we would like to take this opportunity to wish you all of the best on behalf of PTS Africa and the EQ at Work series around executive thoughts. Thank you very much, Thoko. And we wish you all of the best for this year ahead. Ziko Mogwambili.
No, I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank you first, Leroy, for being such a great host, and thanking the PTS Africa team for this opportunity. And also thank you very much to the audience. You've been so engaging, and the questions that you've asked, I'm looking forward to hearing your growth stories, and I'm very open to connect with you on LinkedIn to share more. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll hand over to the technical team, but on behalf of PTS Africa, thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to you joining us again in future. Please feel free to share the link to this session and the previous sessions. There's great insights that are power-packed into all of those conversations that we've had, how you can demystify EQ and look at the opportunities and lessons from the different leadership journeys that we've had an opportunity to talk to. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
The journey to a better life starts with a dream car, a dream house, a dream wedding, and good health. Why not share your journey with a bank that believes in people and their dreams? Standard Bank has the financial expertise to help. Standard Bank, it can be.